I straightened my tie, catching my reflection in the elevator doors. Another day, same old grind. The numbers on the display ticked upward, each ding reminding me I was one floor closer to the 14th. Parker's territory. As soon as the doors slid open, the familiar noise of ringing phones and clattering keyboards filled my ears. I nodded at a few co-workers, their tired, forced smiles mirroring my own. 8 years at Pinnacle Corporation, and what did I have to show for it? A cubicle with a wilting plant and a photo of Maya. That picture felt like a ghost of better times back when I thought I had it all figured out. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I always thought it was ours. Turns out I might have been wrong. Ellis. Parker's voice boomed from across the office. In my office. Now. Suppressing a sigh, I squared my shoulders and headed toward his corner office, the one with the glass walls that made you feel like a goldfish in a bowl. He was on the phone, of course, barely even acknowledging me as I walked in. I stood there like a school kid, waiting outside the principal's door. Finally, he put the phone down and looked at me. "Where are we on the Thompson account?" he barked. "I submitted the proposal yesterday," I replied, keeping my tone as even as possible. "Just waiting on legal to—" "Not good enough," he cut me off, leaning back in his oversized leather chair like some kind of king. "I need it done by tomorrow." I blinked. Was this guy serious? "But sir, legal said they need at least—" Did I stutter, Ellis? His eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped that icy tone that meant he was done messing around. "Tomorrow, or I'll find someone who can handle it." I felt the weight of his words hit me like a punch in the gut. "Yes, sir. I'll make it happen." "Good," he said, that smirk of his creeping back onto his face. "And don't forget, the company party tonight. Mandatory." I gave him a stiff nod, already dreading it. Just as I turned to leave, he called after me, "And bring your lovely wife." "What's her name again?" "Lisa." "Maya." I corrected, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. Right. Maya. Don't forget." His grin made my skin crawl. Back at my desk, I fired off a quick text to Maya. "Company party tonight. Parker insists you come." A couple of minutes later, her reply came through. "Again? Fine. Pick me up at 7. The rest of the day was a blur. Phone calls, emails, and a mad scramble to get the Thompson proposal pushed through, which I somehow managed by the skin of my teeth. Legal wasn't happy, and I knew I'd pay for it later, but I got it done. By the time I loosened my tie and climbed into the car, I was dead on my feet. Maya sat next to me, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. "You look exhausted," she said, glancing over at me. "Long day," I muttered, pulling into the hotel parking lot. Parker's been breathing down my neck. She placed her hand on my knee, her touch light but calculating. "Maybe tonight's your chance to impress him. Could be that promotion you've been chasing." I forced a smile. "Yeah, if only it worked that way." The ballroom was packed when we walked in. The buzz of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the too loud laughter filled the air. I grabbed 2 flutes of champagne from a passing waiter and handed one to Maya. Before I could even take a sip, I heard Parker's voice. "Ellis, there you are." He swaggered over, drink in hand, the other arm wrapped around some blonde from HR. His eyes landed on Maya, looking her up and down in a way that made my stomach turn. "And this must be the lovely Maya." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Parker," Maya said, flashing him a smile that felt just as fake as his compliments. "All good things, I hope," Parker said with a chuckle, throwing me a wink. Though I doubt that. Before I could respond, he clapped his hands, commanding the attention of the entire room. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention." The chatter died down, and suddenly all eyes were on him. That knot in my stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. "First off, I want to thank you all for being here tonight," Parker started, his voice carrying through the room like he owned the place. Because, well, he practically did. "It had been a hell of a year," Parker said, addressing the crowd with that smug grin of his. "Each of you has played a part in our success." There was a polite round of applause, but before it could die down, Parker raised a hand, signaling he wasn't done. "But tonight, I want to talk about something a little different. Something more personal." The room fell silent, and I felt Parker's eyes settle on me and Maya. My gut twisted. Whatever was coming next wasn't good. "You see," Parker continued, his voice smooth, "in business, just like in life, everything comes with a price. The real question is, how much are you willing to pay for what you want? I could feel the tension in the air thickening. Next to me, Maya stiffened, her fingers tightening around her champagne glass. I wanted to look at her, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from Parker. Take our friend Ethan here, Parker said, his hands sweeping in my direction. Hardworking guy. Always reliable. But let's be honest, he's been stuck in the same position for, 5 years now. I could feel the heat rise in my face. He was humiliating me in front of everyone, but I couldn't bring myself to say a word. I wanted to defend myself, but the words just wouldn't come. Well, Ethan, Parker leaned back, his smile turning predatory. I'm here to offer you a way out. A chance to finally move up the ladder. All it'll cost you is 1 weekend. A murmur rippled through the crowd. My head was spinning. What the hell was he getting at? 1 weekend, Parker repeated, as if I hadn't heard him the first time. During which your lovely wife, Maya, will keep me company. His gaze slid over to Maya, lingering in a way that made my blood boil. In return, you get job security, a fat bonus, and a clear shot at that corner office you've been eyeing. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. I turned to Maya, expecting her to be horrified, expecting her to stand up for us, for me. But when I looked into her eyes, all I saw was calm, like she was actually considering it. Maya, I croaked, barely able to get the words out. She met my gaze, and to my absolute shock, her expression didn't change. Then, without even blinking, she turned to Parker and said, I accept. The floor dropped out from under me. The room spun, the faces of my colleagues blurring as my heart pounded in my chest. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick joke. But when I looked from Maya to Parker, the sickening truth slammed into me. This was real. My wife had just agreed, without hesitation, to sleep with my boss. In front of everyone, rage surged through me, hotter than anything I'd ever felt. I wanted to scream, to tear into both of them, to demand answers, but all I could see were the faces of my colleagues, watching me, pitying me, some even whispering in disgust. That's when it hit me. They were waiting to see what I'd do, waiting to see if I'd roll over and take this. I couldn't take it. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. I bolted from the ballroom, through the hotel lobby, and out into the cool night air. Gasping, I gulped down lungfuls of air, trying to make sense of the disaster that had just unfolded. But no matter how hard I tried, there was no making sense of it. My world had just exploded in front of everyone, and in 5 minutes, everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, it was all gone. But as I stood there, panting and shaking in the cold, something else settled over me. A strange clarity. This wasn't just about what happened tonight. This was about every little manipulation, every power play, every line that had been crossed, things I'd been too blind to see, or maybe too weak to stop. I had let it happen, thinking I could climb the ladder if I just played the game right. But not anymore. I straightened, my fists clenching at my sides. They thought they had me figured out. Thought I'd just crumble and accept this humiliation. They had no idea. As I hailed a cab, my mind was already racing. Parker and Maya might think they'd won, but they had no clue what was coming. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. And when I was done, they'd both pay for what they'd done. They'd both learn the true cost of betrayal. Hours later, I was sitting alone in the dark living room. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the mantel. I'd been there since I got home, playing the night's events over and over in my head, each memory stoking the fire of my anger. I'd never felt rage like this before, cold and steady, simmering just below the surface, waiting to erupt. The front door creaked open, and I heard soft footsteps approach. Ethan? Maya's voice, tentative, unsure. Are you here? I didn't answer. I just sat there, watching as she stepped into the room, her party dress wrinkled, her makeup smudged. She jumped when she saw me sitting there, her hand flying to her chest. Jesus, you scared me, she said, flipping on the lamp. Why are you sitting in the dark? My voice came out low, cold. Why don't you tell me why you agreed to whore yourself out to my boss? She flinched like I'd slapped her, but there was no remorse in her eyes, just a flicker of annoyance. That's not fair. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I said, my words cutting like ice. But go ahead, explain it to me. I cut in before Maya could keep going, standing up and glaring at her. Explain how my wife of 7 years could agree to sleep with another man without even hesitating. I demanded, my voice laced with anger. She shot back, her own frustration bubbling to the surface. I did it for us, Ethan. Do you think I want to do this? But you've been stuck in the same position for years, always complaining and never doing anything to change it. This is our chance to finally get ahead. I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound. Our chance? Maya, there's no us anymore. You made that pretty damn clear tonight. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stepped toward me. Please, Ethan, we can work through this. It's just one weekend. I stared at her, my voice cold and controlled. Get out. What? She whispered, looking at me in shock. I said, get out. I repeated, each word heavy with finality. Pack a bag and leave. I don't care where you go, but you're not staying here. She stared at me, as if trying to comprehend what I was saying. You can't be serious. This is my house, too. My house. I corrected her, my voice deadly calm. The house I paid for. Now pack your things and go before I throw you out myself. For a moment, I thought she might argue, but something in my eyes must have told her I wasn't bluffing. Without another word, she turned and went upstairs. I listened as she moved around, the sound of drawers opening and closing, the zipping of her suitcase. When she came back down, her eyes were red, but she didn't shed a tear. This isn't over, she said quietly as she stood by the door. We need to talk about this. I didn't respond. I didn't even look at her. After a pause, she sighed and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her. Only then did I let myself slump back into the chair, the weight of everything crashing down on me all at once. As I stared at the framed photos of happier times on the wall, my mind began to clear. This wasn't just about Maya's betrayal. It was about Parker, about the years of being used, manipulated, and kept down. And now I had a plan. The next morning I called in sick to work. I spent the day making phone calls, researching, and putting everything into place. By the time evening rolled around, I was ready. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. We need to talk. Meet me at Cafe Blue at 7? For a second, I considered ignoring her. But no, I had to play this right. I typed back, fine. The cafe was busy when I arrived, but I spotted Maya right away, sitting at a corner table, fidgeting with her napkin. She looked up when I approached, hope flashing in her eyes. Ethan, I'm so glad you came, she said as I sat down. I know you're angry, but please let me explain. Save it. I cut her off, my voice cold. I'm not here to listen to your excuses. I'm here to tell you how this is going to go. Her eyes widened in surprise. What do you mean? I leaned forward, keeping my voice low and controlled. I'm going along with this little arrangement of yours and Parker's. Her surprise deepened. You are? But last night you said. I've had time to think, I interrupted smoothly. And you're right. This could be a big opportunity for me. For us. The lie tasted bitter, but I forced a smile. I was just shocked last night, but I've come around. Maya's relief was immediate and obvious. Oh, Ethan, I'm so glad you understand. I promise, it's just this one time and then... Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I said, cutting her off again. For now, let's just focus on making sure everything goes smoothly this weekend. Have you worked out the details with Parker? She nodded eagerly, pulling out her phone. He booked a suite at the Grandview Hotel. We're supposed to meet him there Friday evening. I made a show of jotting down the information in my phone. Perfect. And Maya? I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry about last night. I overreacted. Her eyes softened, tears welling up as she squeezed my hand. It's okay. I'm just so relieved we're okay. I love you, Ethan. It took every ounce of willpower to smile back and say, I love you too. As soon as I left the cafe, the fake smile disappeared, replaced by cold determination. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now it was time for Phase 2. The next day at work, I made sure to run into Parker in the break room. He spotted me right away, smirking like he had the upper hand. Ah, Ellis, feeling better after your dramatic exit the other night? I forced a sheepish smile, trying to look embarrassed. About that, sir. I wanted to apologize. It was just a lot to process, you know? But I've had time to think, and well, I'm on board. Parker's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Is that so? And what does the lovely Maya think about your change of heart? She's relieved. I lied easily. We both are. We've realized this could be a great opportunity for all of us. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. I'm glad you've come to your senses, Ellis. I think you'll find this arrangement mutually beneficial. I nodded, swallowing down the bile rising in my throat. I'm sure I will, sir. Maya mentioned you've booked a suite at the Grandview for the weekend. That's right, Parker confirmed. I assumed she filled you in on the details? She did, I said. I just wanted to check if there was anything else I needed to know. Parker's grin widened. Just make sure Maya's ready. I'll take care of the rest. I forced another smile, but inside, I was already counting down the minutes until I could destroy everything Parker thought he had over me. Any preferences or special requests you'd like to make? Parker chuckled as he clapped me on the shoulder, his smirk widening. Eager to please, aren't you, Ellis? Don't worry, I'll take good care for your wife. You just focus on that Thompson account and leave the rest to me. It took everything in me not to recoil from his touch, but instead, I forced a tight smile. Of course, sir. I'll get right on it. As I walked away, my mind was spinning. The pieces were falling into place. I had all the information I needed. Now it was time to execute the plan. That evening, I made a trip to an electronics store, buying a high-end hidden camera and a voice recorder. The sales clerk gave me a suspicious look as I checked out, but I didn't care. Let people think what they wanted. I had bigger Joshlims to deal with. Back home, I spent hours setting up the equipment, testing every angle, every sound. I needed it to be perfect. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Packed for the weekend. Still okay with this? My jaw clenched as I typed back. All good. See you Friday. Friday came faster than I wanted it to. I parked my car across the street from the Grandview Hotel and watched as Maya strolled inside, rolling her suitcase behind her. 10 minutes later, Parker pulled up in his flashy sports car, looking every bit the predator who thought he'd just caught his prey. Once they were inside, I made my move. I'd sweet-talked the front desk into giving me a key to the room next to Parker's suite, convincing them I was planning a surprise for my wife's birthday. Now I slipped into the adjoining room and quietly set up my equipment, angling the camera to capture everything in the suite next door. With a deep breath, I slipped on the headphones connected to the audio recorder. What followed was the longest, most gut-wrenching hour of my life. I listened as Parker and Maya entered the suite, as drinks were poured, as small talk and forced laughter filled the air. I heard Parker's cocky voice bragging about his past conquests and business victories. Maya's laughs were nervous, forced, just like the smile she'd given him all night. And then came the moment I'd been dreading. You know, Maya, Parker's voice came through the headphones, slightly slurred from the alcohol. I've had my eye on you for a while now. Always wondered what you saw in a pushover like Ellis. I heard Maya laugh, but it was strained. Ethan's a good man. Good, sure, Parker scoffed. But is he exciting? Does he make you feel alive? There was a rustling sound, and I saw Parker move closer to Maya on the couch, his hand landing on her knee. My stomach churned. I could show you things Ethan never could, Parker murmured. Give you pleasures you've only dreamed of. My fist clenched so tightly I thought my nails might draw blood, but I forced myself to keep watching, keep listening. I needed this evidence. What disgusted me the most wasn't just Parker's words. It was that Maya didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a low, seductive whisper. Why don't you show me then? What followed was a blur of clothes hitting the floor, moans and grunts that made me want to rip the headphones off and smash the camera into 1,000 pieces. But I didn't. I endured every sickening second, recording it all. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice. At one point, during a brief lull in the action, I heard Parker's smug voice again. You know, this arrangement doesn't have to be a one-time thing, he said. I could make life very comfortable for you. And Ethan, if you're open to it. Maya's giggle came through the headphones, muffled but unmistakable. That laugh told me everything I needed to know. My wife, no, my ex-wife, wasn't just in this sick game. She was all in. By the time morning rolled around, I felt hollowed out, like everything inside me had been scooped out and replaced with cold, hard determination. I had what I needed: undeniable proof of Maya's infidelity and Parker's abuse of power. As I packed up my equipment, I heard them stirring in the next room, casually talking about breakfast as if they hadn't just obliterated a marriage and corrupted a workplace. I slipped out of the hotel unnoticed, the camera and recorder tucked safely in my bag, the weight of it all nothing compared to the stone in my chest. But as I drove home, that weight began to shift. It wasn't crushing me anymore. It was hardening into something solid, something stronger. They thought they'd won, thought I was weak, that I'd crumble under the humiliation. They had no idea what was coming. As I pulled into my driveway, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. The weekend wasn't over yet, and neither was I. Monday morning came with an ominous air. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my tie with steady hands, knowing what I was about to do would change everything. The man staring back at me in the mirror looked different, older, harder, with a cold glint of determination in his eyes that hadn't been there before. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Maya. "Can we talk before the meeting?" I ignored it, slipping the phone into my pocket and grabbing my briefcase. Inside was everything I needed to see this through. Today was the day everything would change. When I walked into the office, there was an unusual buzz in the air, a nervous energy that spread through the cubicles like wildfire. People whispered as I passed, shooting me sideways glances, clearly in the loop about Friday night's events. Word travels fast in a place like Pinnacle. "Ethan." I turned to see Rachel from accounting, concern etched in her features. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile, keeping my voice light. "Never better, Rachel. Thanks for asking." Before she could respond, Parker's booming voice sliced through the office noise. "All right, people, meet me in 5 minutes. Ellis, my office. Now." I didn't let my smile falter as I walked toward Parker's corner office. Inside, he was lounging back in his chair, looking like he'd just won some twisted game. He gestured for me to close the door, and I complied, taking a seat across from him. "We need to chat," Parker said, leaning forward, that same predatory grin stretching across his face. "I just wanted to thank you for your cooperation this weekend." Maya was most accommodating. My hands clenched in my lap, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm glad to hear it, sir. I trust everything went satisfactorily." "Oh, more than satisfactorily," Parker chuckled, clearly reveling in his victory. "In fact, I was thinking we might make this a regular arrangement. What do you say, Ellis? Your lovely wife keeps me entertained, and you keep climbing that corporate ladder. Everyone wins." For a fleeting moment, I imagined lunging across the desk and wiping that smug grin off his face. Instead, I forced another smile, my tone calm. "That sounds interesting, sir. Maybe we can discuss the details after the meeting." Parker raised his eyebrows, clearly taken aback by my apparent eagerness. "Well, looks like you've finally learned how to play the game, Ellis." "I'm impressed." "I'm a quick study," I replied, standing up. "Shall we head to the meeting?" As we walked toward the conference room, I saw Maya standing near the entrance, her face pale. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened with a mix of guilt and desperation. She reached out, her hand lightly touching my arm. "Ethan," she pleaded, "can we please talk?" I brushed past her without saying a word, taking my seat at the conference table. She stood there for a moment, frozen, before she quietly sat down on the opposite side. Her eyes never left me, but I refused to meet her gaze. Parker took his place at the head of the table, clearing his throat. "All right, people, let's get down to business. First on the agenda." "Actually, sir," I interrupted, standing up. "If you don't mind, I have something I'd like to address first." Parker frowned, clearly annoyed by the disruption. "Can it wait, Ellis? We've got a lot to cover." "I'm afraid it can't," I replied, my voice carrying across the room. "It's about ethics. Corporate ethics, to be precise." A murmur of unease spread through the room. Employees shifted in their seats, casting uneasy glances at one another. Parker's frown deepened, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about, Ellis?" I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "I'm talking about abuse of power, sir. About using one's position to coerce and manipulate others for personal gain." "Ethan, what are you doing?" Maya hissed from across the table, her voice sharp with panic. Her face had gone white. I ignored her, addressing the room. I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about what transpired at the company party last Friday. About the arrangement Mr. Parker proposed, one that involved my wife and myself. A shocked silence fell over the room. Everyone was holding their breath, eyes wide as they tried to process what was unfolding before them. Parker's face twisted into a sneer. Ellis, this is highly inappropriate. You're making baseless accusations. I'm not making any accusations, sir. I pulled a small flash drive from my briefcase and held it up for the room to see. I'm simply presenting facts. You see, I recorded everything. Every conversation, every disgusting proposition you made. Gasps rippled through the room. Parker's face paled for a split second before his expression darkened. You're bluffing, he growled. I placed the flash drive on the table in front of me. You can find out for yourself. I've got footage, audio, everything that proves you've been using your power to manipulate and abuse your employees. Parker stood up abruptly, his face turning red with fury. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Ellis. I'll ruin you for this. I looked him dead in the eye, calm and unshaken. No, sir. You've already ruined yourself. The room was tense, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone present. The silence stretched thick and uncomfortable. I've already sent copies of this evidence to legal, HR, and the board, I continued. They'll be reviewing it shortly. Parker's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, the reality of what was happening finally sinking in. You thought you could manipulate me. You thought you could manipulate us, I said, finally glancing at Maya, who sat motionless, staring at the table. But you were wrong. With that, I turned and walked out of the conference room, the stunned silence of my colleagues echoing behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The game was over, and I had won. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, the tension thickening as Parker's expression shifted from irritated to outright alarmed. His voice, shaky with rising panic, broke through the noise. Ellis, I don't know what you think you're doing, but I suggest you stop right now. I didn't even flinch. I was far beyond the point of fear. Oh, I'm just getting started, sir, I replied, pulling a small device from my pocket. I saw his eyes flicker toward it, knowing exactly what it was. You see, I got some very interesting recordings from this weekend. Would you like to hear them? Before anyone could respond, I pressed play. Parker's voice filled the conference room, slurred but unmistakably his. I've had my eye on you for a while now, Maya. Always wondered what you saw in a pushover like Ellis. The room fell into stunned silence, broken only by the sound of Maya's recorded voice. Ethan's a good man. Parker's scoff followed, dripping with disdain. Good, sure. But is he excited? Does he make you feel alive? I paused the recording, the weight of the words hanging in the air like a noose. Slowly, I scanned the room, my colleagues sitting in stunned disbelief. Some looked horrified, others disgusted. Most of them had known Parker wasn't a saint, but this was the proof they'd never had. Parker's face had drained of color, his hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles had turned white. There's more, I said coldly, breaking the silence. Much more. Detailed accounts of Mr. Parker's past indiscretions, his methods of manipulating employees, coercing them to comply with his sick little games. And, of course, plenty of evidence of what transpired this weekend. Parker's composure finally cracked. You can't do this, he sputtered, his voice frantic. It's illegal. You had no right to record. Actually, sir, I interrupted, keeping my tone calm and even. I think you'll find I had every right. The hotel room was booked in my name, after all. And as for the legality, well, I'm sure the board of directors and the legal team will have plenty to say about that. Not to mention the press. Parker's face went ashen as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. He turned, desperation flashing in his eyes as he looked around the room. He's lying. This is all a setup. But the doubt was already spreading among the others. They'd all felt the sting of Parker's manipulations over the years, seeing his ruthless side. This was just the final piece of the puzzle, confirmation of what many had long suspected. Suddenly, Maya's voice broke through the tension, thick with tears. Ethan, please, don't do this. We can work this out. For the first time, I turned fully to face her, meeting her tear-filled eyes with a cold stare. Work what out, Maya? My voice was calm, but devoid of any warmth. Your betrayal? The fact that you were willing to sell yourself and our marriage for a chance at a more comfortable life. She flinched, as if my words had slapped her across the face. It wasn't like that, she whispered. I did it for us. There is no us anymore, I replied, my tone as hollow as I felt inside. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the table to her. Her hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes widening when she realized what it contained. Divorce papers, she gasped, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, feeling nothing as I watched her crumble. I think it's best for everyone if we make a clean break, don't you? Tears streamed down her face now, her shoulders shaking as she struggled to hold herself together. Even please, I love you. Her words might have cut me once, but now they barely registered. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I'd thought I loved for so many years. She had made her choice. So had I. I stood up, not sparing her another glance. This meeting's over. I turned to Parker, whose once confident facade had completely shattered. Expect to hear from legal soon, sir. I walked out of the room, the stunned silence of my colleagues trailing behind me. They had all witnessed the fall of their boss, and perhaps a bit of their own illusions about power and success in this company. I didn't care anymore. I had taken back control of my life. And as I stepped out into the cool air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: freedom. As I drove out of the city, the weight of the day's events settled in my chest like a heavy stone. The winding road ahead felt like a new beginning, but the hollow ache inside me was hard to shake. My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from former colleagues, reporters desperate for a comment, and Maya's name popping up far too often. I knew what they all wanted, but I wasn't ready to deal with any of them. I needed space, time to figure out what came next. I'd booked a cabin by the lake, a quiet retreat, far away from the mess I'd just left behind. The drive felt surreal, my mind replaying every moment from the meeting, from Parker's pale face to Maya's desperate pleas. By the time I arrived at the cabin, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the water. I stepped out of the car, the cool air a welcome change from the suffocating tension I'd been living in for weeks. The cabin was small, rustic, with a wooden porch that overlooked the lake. It wasn't much, but it was exactly what I needed. As I settled in, I couldn't help but think of the people left in the wake of today's destruction. Rachel from accounting had looked at me with a mix of concern and confusion when I walked past her earlier. We'd always gotten along, sharing the occasional lunch in the break room, and she'd seen right through my fake smile that morning. I wondered if she, like the others, had pieced together what was really happening behind the scenes. Then there was Josh from legal. I noticed him eyeing Parker during the meeting, his brow furrowed as he scribbled in his notepad. Josh wasn't stupid. He knew something was off, and I could tell he wasn't buying Parker's desperate denials. I wouldn't be surprised if Josh was already pulling strings, making sure the company distanced itself from Parker as fast as possible. I almost felt sorry for him. He'd always been the guy who tried to stay neutral, avoid the office drama. But now he was neck-deep in it. As the sun dipped lower, I thought about Lucas, my closest friend in the office. He hadn't been at the meeting, but I'd seen him earlier that day, giving me a knowing nod when we passed in the hall. Lucas had always been the one warning me that Parker was trouble, that my marriage to Maya seemed more strained than I was willing to admit. He wasn't one to say, "I told you so," but I knew that, deep down, he'd seen this disaster coming long before I did. I owed him a call, but that would have to wait. By the time the stars began to appear in the sky, I was sitting on the porch, watching the last rays of daylight flicker across the surface of the lake. The quiet was calming, but my thoughts kept circling back to Maya. Her final words in the meeting, "Ethan, please. I love you," echoed in my mind. But what was left to love? The woman I once thought I knew had been willing to sell herself for comfort, for power. She had betrayed not just me, but everything we had built together. The marriage was over, and I knew that no amount of tears or apologies could fix what was broken. My phone buzzed again. This time I didn't even look at the screen. I powered it off and tossed it onto the small table beside me. Let the world spin on without me for a while. Whatever they needed, it could wait. As I sat there, I could hear the faint hum of voices from a nearby cabin, the sound of laughter drifting over the water. It reminded me that life kept moving, even after all the chaos I had unleashed. Maybe somewhere in the laughter was the couple who had rented the cabin next to mine. I'd seen them earlier, a man and woman, pejoshibly in their late 20s, happily unpacking their car, seemingly oblivious to the kind of emotional wreckage people like me were dealing with. I envied them for a moment, their innocence, their simplicity, but I knew better than to assume their lives were perfect. The night air had a crisp edge to it, and as I stood up, stretching muscles that had stiffened from sitting too long, I thought of what lay ahead. I didn't know where I'd land or what I'd do next. My career in this city is likely finished. The bridges I'd burned were gone for good. But as I inhaled the cool night breeze, I realized that maybe that was a good thing. Maybe the destruction of my old life was exactly what I needed to rebuild something better. I thought again of Lucas, Rachel, and the others. Maybe some of them would reach out. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in years, I was okay with not knowing. I didn't have to have all the answers right now. I didn't have to fit into anyone else's expectations or timelines. As the night settled in and the stars dotted the sky, I stood by the edge of the lake, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. The future was uncertain, the road ahead winding and unclear. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. Whatever came next, I'd face it head-on my own terms. The cost of betrayal had been steep. My marriage, my career, the life I thought I knew. But as I stood there under the quiet sky, I realized something. The price of reclaiming my freedom, of taking back control of my life, had been worth every penny. And whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. Alone, but free.